Hi everyone, and welcome to week 1, day number 3 of my ChessGoals study plan. ChessGoals study plans contain 12 weeks of activities with day-by-day checklists. So I have my study plan printed out here. I check off the activities as I go. So for day number 3, I had 3 activities to complete. Check the daily games, which I am waiting for the ChessGoals daily tournament starting March 1st. Play 2 15 plus 10 games. I'm altering that a little bit to play 10 plus 0 games just to save a little bit of time, and also it's easier to find opponents. And then analyze one of those games with a level 3 game analysis. Now in the description below there'll be a couple links talking about the study plans, the different levels of game analysis, and then also our daily tournament invite link. So if you want to get into the daily tournament, check in the description below. Okay, so the two rapid games I played today. The first game, my opponent blundered a piece kind of out of the opening, and he clicked the resign button like immediately after blundering, so I don't think that one's really worth looking at. Game number 2 was interesting. It was sort of a symmetrical position out of the opening, and around move 8, my opponent offered me a draw. I declined it. My opponent thought for about a minute, and then went on to beat me pretty smoothly. Like I felt like I had some counter chances. I was trying to fight for play, but they did a great job controlling my play. And then afterwards, I got notified by chess.com that my rating points were refunded. That player had actually cheated. So instead of playing 2 rapid games, I decided to play a third game just because I felt that second game wasn't too productive. And this is game number 3. So I'm going to go through this at sort of a level 3 analysis based on the analysis blog post that I referred to. Alright, so we have a Caro-Kann. We just created a Caro-Kann course for ChessGoals. We'll put a link to that in the description. And this is the exchange variation. Oh, and now once you see c4, this switches from exchange variation to the Panov attack. I played knight c6. And this is actually probably not the best move because my opponent could take d5 right away, but I won't get too far into that here. So fortunately, they played c5, and already here we can see that Stockfish says e5 is a good move. So this is something I need to work on. Even though I just made a Caro-Kann course, I need to kind of go back through these lines and get my theory down, because I think knight c6 was a mistake. And then here I should be playing e5 to take advantage of my opponent's move order. But I didn't even think of e5 as an option. So the main thing I'm looking at here is this pawn on d4 is a backward pawn for white, and it's already being attacked by my knight. So the setup is going to be g6, bishop g7, and pressure the d pawn. And I remembered at least that much from the Caro-Kann course. So here we put the bishop on g7, castle, bishop b5, bishop to g4. So now we can see I'm pinning this knight, and the knight has a job of guarding the d4 pawn, as well as the queen guarding d4. So my threat is bishop takes f3, and white either has to ruin their pawns, which he takes, or take with queen, potentially dropping this pawn. So here to relieve that tension or the pressure on d4, white captures and castles. Now here, Stockfish is already saying I'm up 1.7. The move I played was knight e4, but I think tactically, knight e4 isn't the best because there's actually a way for my opponent to get out of trouble by playing h3. So what I should have played is knight d7. The nice thing with knight d7 is I'm threatened to play e5, and this knight's hitting the c pawn too. And if this d pawn takes, then I have a passed d pawn myself in the end. So play could continue rook c1, e5, d takes e. Now I have sort of a choice of which pawn to take, but if I take the c pawn, there might be a discovered attack on my knight with the rook lined up. So I can take e5. Remember, this knight is still pinned. Bishop takes, and here I have a nice position with the bishop pair, but more importantly I have the passed pawn on d5, because white could play h3 here, and then I probably need to give up one bishop for the knight. So in the game I played knight e4, and what my opponent could have played here is h3. And I didn't look too closely at this, but after bishop takes f3, queen takes, if I try to win the pawn, now just a bunch of trades start to happen. And in the end, I'm not up any material. So here you can see the pawns are equal, one bishop each, one queen each, two rooks each. And this is something that kind of happened to me in the endgame in this game as well. I wasn't calculating out the trades clearly enough. So something to keep in mind for my takeaways. Alright, so after knight e4, my opponent played bishop back to e3. And here my plan is just keep developing new pieces and apply pressure. So my rook on b8 hits the pawn on b2. Knight a4. Now here, this is just, I think, a little bit of inexperience in this structure for me. One of the great ways that I can attack this pawn on d4 is to dislodge the bishop on e3 with f5. f5 is a really strong move here, threatening f4. Bishop takes f3, and this d pawn becomes very tough for white to defend. f5, though, was not even on my radar during the game. So, something I need to keep in mind for future games. b3, queen b4. Again, trying to add a little pressure here. Queen d3, and now I took my opportunity to double the pawns. But again, here f5 is a really strong move. So now I'll fast forward a bit till things start to get a little more interesting. It's a bit of a maneuvering game. I kind of found this idea later on to play e5 after knight d7, and I think positionally that makes sense. I'm trying to create a passed pawn on d5. Queen a6. Yeah, I think tactically this is working well for me, because after e takes d, I had this all calculated out, that after bishop f4, queen b5, white is forced to go for the queen trade. If queen takes a7, rook b7 traps the queen. So now if we do a material count, I'm up one pawn. It's this pawn on d4, and it's protected by my bishop. So pretty well secured. Bishop d6, rook d8. This is completely fine. There's really no attack for white. Rook coming into e7 is not a big threat because I can always play bishop f8. Rook e7, bishop to f8. So that was kind of on my agenda anyways, bishop f8, trying to trade off this bishop on d6. Knight e5, d3. So I'm trying to hold on to this pawn. I didn't want the white rook to be able to capture it. g5. So right around this point, I started to lose the thread of the position. I have a minute 23 to my opponent's 5 minutes and 12 seconds. There's no increment in this game, so I was starting to feel a little bit of the time pressure. And that's something I should think about for future games, is playing a little bit quicker in the opening. Because really being 4 minutes behind on time gives my opponent a large advantage on the clock, and I'm much more likely to make a blunder with time pressure. So here, what I didn't realize is the strength of swinging this rook over to the king side. So what I should have played here is rook b4, and after king g3, I can play g5, and this rook is coming to f4. Everything is defended for me, and the rook is super strong. In this position, Stockfish already says I'm up 3.3. So up over a piece with this strong of a position. So I missed this idea. I played g5 first, and now you'll see in the next couple of moves, I actually get my rook trapped here. Rook a5 was not a very good idea by me, because after a4, this rook has no way out. It can't go to b5, and it can't get to b6. Everything's defended by pawns. So I trapped my own rook. White wins the pawn back. And now in this position, if you do a pawn count, we're actually even on pawns. I have a slight edge because I do have this passed pawn still. But really, this was not what I wanted. I wanted to hold that pawn, try to keep adding pressure with the knights on the board, and all these trades are helping white in terms of increasing their drawing chances, or maybe making it messy and white can come out with the win. And then in this position, one more time, I kind of didn't have a good feel for what to do. I played f5, but really I need to think about controlling the counterplay. So I knew white was thinking of putting a rook on the e-file, but for some reason I thought after f5 things were pretty safe. But what I really should have done was played king g7, rook e3, king f6, And my king does a great job controlling these squares. If this rook comes to e8, then white drops the b pawn. But this is a nice way for me to try to control everything without giving white too much counterplay. So in the game after f5, I'll fast forward a bit, but what we can see here is we started getting into this scenario where trades started happening. I get a pawn, they get a pawn, I get a pawn. Bunch of rook checks. Things get really messy. I'm down to 36 seconds. I can probably stop here. I ended up winning the game, but it just got really sloppy. Not a win to be proud of. It was more just doing my best efforts to flag my opponent with 36 seconds to 228. So now the next thing I like to do is think about takeaways from the game. So I think one thing I should think about when I'm playing 10-minute games, play a little bit faster in the opening. I spent too much time to get down to a minute and a half against, I think it was 5.5 minutes. But then in terms of ideas, I need to work on the opening. Knight c6 was not a good move. And then I also need to be aware of the e5 break after my opponent played c5. The next thing I need to think about is the captures. So when there's a whole bunch of trades happening, both in this position and also sort of in that endgame with the rooks, white's rooks attacking my pawns, I need to calculate out the captures and make sure that I'm getting the result I want out of the position. And then the other idea that I need to think about is this f-pawn push. So those are three sort of constructive things that for me to take away from this game. Positives, I think I played fairly well in the opening. I had the advantage. I had that passed pawn on d3 with my knight guarding it. At that point I was up close to 3 pawns. Had I done the rook left to b4, and my opponent still tried king g3. And then I guess flagging the opponent at the end when I was down on time in an equal endgame, that was something that was positive, but in terms of trying to be a stronger chess player, that's not super helpful. All right, so that's the end of week 1, day number 3 of my study plan. Please make sure to check out the links in the description. And if you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. See you in the next video.